Welcome to GrassRoot, Ohio, conversations with everyday people working on important issues here in Columbus and all around Ohio. I'm Carolyn Harding, and today I'm talking with Pat Marida and Lee Blackburn with the Ohio Nuclear Free Network. They are concerned with the Ohio House Bill 434, and we'll learn what it's about and what we can do about it. Pat Marida has been an anti-nuclear activist since the 1980s, when she was a board member of the Ohio Nuclear Weapons Freeze campaign. For 25 years, she held volunteer positions with the Sierra Club, working on environmental issues and chairing the Ohio Sierra Club Nuclear Free Committee. She is currently a coordinator with the Ohio Nuclear Free Network. Lee Blackburn is one of the founding members of the Ohio Nuclear Free Network and is currently working to oppose Ohio House Bill 434, a senseless bill that provides no benefits, but could saddle the state with billions in losses. He is a former chief investment officer for a major real estate concern that invested some $3 billion in low to moderate income housing under his purview. He became concerned about radioactive materials and its deadly legacy after becoming familiar with the Portsmouth Gaseous Diffusion Plant in southern Ohio, where uranium was initially enriched to weapons grade. Beginning in 1991 and until its relegation to cold standby in 2001, Ports, or the A plant as it's locally known, supplied low-enriched uranium for nuclear reactors. And thanks to the tireless efforts of Senator Sherrod Brown, the Department of Energy was required in 2008 to establish a community-based site-specific advisory board to make recommendations to the Department of Energy on cleanup efforts at the site. Mr. Blackburn served as one of the founding members and still attends board meetings to provide testimony as a private citizen. Ohio House Bill 434 is relatively short, only 14 pages, and yet this bill is massive in scope, to quote your blog spot. So tell us, what's in it and why do we need to be concerned?
Certainly, proponent testimony was presented today in the Ohio Senate Committee on Energy and Public Utilities. There were 6 individuals who spoke in favor of it. They have not had more than 8 individuals at any one time speak in favor of the bill. Of the 6 who spoke today, 5 of them are associated with an organization called E-Generation Foundation. And it is the organization that would benefit from House Bill 434, which is termed the Advanced Nuclear Technology Helping Energize Mankind Bill, or Anthem Act. As was mentioned by John Morrow, a member of E-Generation Foundation, in his testimony today, the founders of E-Generation have been trying since 2013 to get legislation passed that would provide for, among other things, a molten salt reactor. Molten salt reactor technology is old school technology that really didn't pan out. It was done in the 60s by the Department of Energy at Oak Ridge, and it was shut down 4 years after the fact. It had a number of temporary shutdowns because of massive corrosion caused by the salt in the reactors. In any case, this is the 3rd major iteration of House Bill 434. The initial bill done a few years back was 56 pages. As you mentioned, the current bill is only 14 pages, of which 6 of those 14 pages are taken up by describing how the Ohio Nuclear Development Authority, the oversight board, would be set up. So you can see there's not much substance left to this bill. However, it is a bill that is all about nuclear, and it could create some tremendous problems. One of the testimonies today provided by Dr. Edward File talked about how molten salt reactors can take spent nuclear fuel and dissolve it so that it's completely gone. What he just temporarily, or how shall I say, in passing mentioned was that this fuel has to be reprocessed before it can be used in the molten salt reactors. Unfortunately, reprocessing is illegal in the United States and has been for 30 years. So we need to keep in mind that everything pertaining to House Bill 434 is theoretical. None of this has ever been done before. And while there are those individuals who are working to try to make these reactors possible today, none are in operation as of right now.
So Lee and Pat, some environmentalists consider nuclear power green energy because there's no carbon. Can you talk about that? And is that something that they're advocating for this bill, saying it's good for Ohio and our environment?
Yes, well, they're advocating a lot of things about this bill. And of course, one of them is that the nuclear industry talk that nuclear power is, you know, clean and green and low carbon or no carbon. But actually, they're only talking about no carbon being in the nuclear chain reaction itself. There's a huge amount of carbon released and energy needed for the uranium mining, the milling, the refining, and the fuel fabrication. All about how a nuclear power plant gets its fuel is just highly energy intensive and highly polluting. These huge mines with large tailing piles and tailing ponds are located, unfortunately, on Native American lands quite often, and the lands of marginalized people. And then we also have the waste, the energy that's going to be taken to isolate the waste for hundreds of thousands, even millions of years. There's going to be dangerous radioactivity generated. And all along the way, all through all of this, radioactivity escapes all through the trucking and other industries.
Now, what is different about this bill? Is it illegal right now to build a nuclear reactor, or why this bill? Why do they want this State House to pass this? Why? What's the necessity of it?
Well, they haven't come right out and said it, but it appears that they have tried on several occasions to get funding from the federal government and have not been successful. So they've turned their attention to the state, basically saying that, well, the state needs to contribute as well as the national government in funding for nuclear. So it's, from my perspective, a money grab.
Okay. So can you tell us, kind of break down this bill, are the main facets of it, and explain to us why we have to fight this bill?
Well, the bill would create, it basically would simply create an Ohio Nuclear Development Authority. And so that group is charged with research and development of a new nuclear reactor, what they call advanced. And the problem with a new state authority is that what is it? And Ohio only has one authority right now, and it is listed on the website with the Ohio agencies. Now, the difference between an agency and an authority is murky, but state authorities, they can conduct business outside of the typical accountability requirements for things like employment practices, contracts, procurement procedures, financial reporting, and they can issue bonds. They can dip into public treasuries.
So it sounds a little bit, is it something like Jobs Ohio? Is it it's kind of a bit separate from accountability by the public, and it's like a private public entity? Is that what they're trying to create?
So yes, one of the most serious problems with this bill is that this new authority that they are proposing would be put under the auspices of the Ohio Department of Development. And they write contracts for Jobs Ohio. And Jobs Ohio is a public-private industry. There are extraordinary limitations on public access to Jobs Ohio that were written into law more than a decade ago. Mm-hmm. So it's Jobs Ohio is beyond the reach of the Ohio Open Records Act, ethics laws. They're beyond the reach of the Sunshine Act and also the Ohio Administrative Procedures Act. So this is one of the secrecy is one of the hugest problems of this bill.
It would basically mean that you could have a reactor built right next door to you and you wouldn't even know it. And maybe not even know it once it's complete. There's no need to let the public know.
Well, what size are these reactors? Are they small?
Well, they're talking about research reactors, but that's the camel's nose under the tent. I'm sure that they'll quickly turn them into small modular reactors, which can be up to 200 megawatts in power, which is about 1/5 the size of a standard nuclear reactor operating today.
I see. So they could be more hidden. Folks, like you say, wouldn't know that this is happening next door to them.
Sure, or you could drive by it every day and not know what it was that they were building.
So, as the group Ohio Nuclear Free Network, is it because nuclear, or all things nuclear you are against, or is this bill what they're trying to do with this old technology, the molten salt technology? It's particularly bad, or is it just the industry is not sustainable?
Yes.
Pat or Lee?
My simple answer to that question is yes, all of the above. There's lots of different issues pertaining to it. There's also issues pertaining to present day operating nuclear reactors. There's been a number of issues with Davis-Besse. There have been some with Perry. As you mentioned in my introduction, I sat on the board for the site-specific advisory board down in Piketon, Ohio, for an enrichment facility. There are issues there. There's issues with the cleanup. There's off-site contamination. There was a report that was just completed by Joe Mangano from New Jersey. He's an epidemiologist. He looked at deaths related to the county of Piketon and found that it's twice the average within the state. There have been a number of news programs in Cincinnati about the problems related to that particular facility. So it's hard to find anything that's really good about nuclear. There's been way too many problems associated with it. As Pat indicated, after 70 years, we still don't know what to do with the waste. They'll tell you that, yeah, well, we'll just chop it up and dump it into these molten salt reactors and be done with it. But that's not reality. Reality is that this stuff is going to be around for thousands of years.
What's your main issue personally? What resonates the deepest for you, Pat? And then I want to hear you, Lee. There's so many reasons why folks need to know about this bill and fight it. But Pat, what's your number one reason?
Okay, well, I'm a pharmacist by profession. And back in 1981, I read Carl Sagan's book, Cosmos, and the last chapter was about nuclear weapons and nuclear war. And I was just so appalled by that I started getting active in anti-nuclear issues, as you mentioned in your introduction. And I am not a nuclear engineer, but I've studied physics. I've had courses in that. And I do understand the biology of how radioactivity affects human cells, and it's deadly. It's like a small nuclear reaction happening in your, inside your body. If you inhale it, if you ingest it, it's incredibly dangerous. Down there at Piketon, at the Portsmouth nuclear site, which Lee was talking about, the Department of Labor under the workers' compensation has given out $1.1 billion in health costs for workers there who've had illnesses that were caused by the plant. And we assume that most of those were caused by radioactive exposures. And we're, certainly, well, lots of people have died, and there are 2 class action lawsuits down there by families of people who have become ill. So that's my that's my background. And yes, our group, the Ohio Nuclear Free Network, is indeed opposed to nuclear power and weapons. We make the connection between the two, that nuclear power is a front for the weapons, and that it must be kept in place in order to justify the weapons. There's the technology overlaps, the education overlaps, the funding overlaps.
Interesting. Thank you, Pat. How about you, Lee? What's your number one reason why you're
Well,
so
there's a number of reasons. Pat pointed out one that seriously bothers me, and that's the fact that our government is not truthful about nuclear and about what's going on. Pat mentioned that the Department of Labor has paid out 1.1 billion, that's B billion, to individuals who have in one way or another suffered from the Piketon plant. Yet at the same time, the Department of Energy will say, everything's fine, it's all safe, there are no issues. To your question pertaining to what the biggest issue is for me, it's probably the fact that when something goes wrong, it creates a nuclear dead zone. If we take a look at Chernobyl, if we take a look at Fukushima, these are areas that are going to be uninhabitable for centuries. And as we build more of these reactors, as we have more accidents, we're going to have more of these little pockets in the world of areas where nothing exists. Nobody can live there. And our world is crowded as it is. We don't need more dead zones.
I hear you. Thank you. Let's go back to House Bill 434. Where are we, and how popular is it, and how possible is it to pass in the Senate? It's already passed in the House, so now it's going before the Senate. So is the Republican majority at the State House pro this bill? And how can we stop it if indeed we must?
Well, that's a hard question to answer. But this bill, the legislators really don't know about this bill, and they don't probably know a lot about nuclear energy. And so they don't know what questions to ask. And like in the proponent testimony today, they were talking about all the wonders of nuclear power, never mentioning the bill. None of the things they talked about today, all the proponents, they weren't really about the bill. They were about all the things they were going to create. They were going to solve all the problems. They were going to have they were going to use up all the nuclear waste in the country. They were going to they're talking about space exploration, and they're talking about global peace and security, and they're talking about oh gosh, it's hard, just about everything wonderful. All of the disadvantages of nuclear power were kind of claimed to be advantages. There's no deaths from nuclear power.
We're all trained to accept the wisdom of the experts as it relates to anything. And when those experts don't tell you the truth, it's hard to know that it's not the truth, especially when you don't quite understand how it works or how it operates. In the testimony today, Dr. File had talked about lowering costs because he was asked by Senator Craig, how do we deal with the issue of cost? And his answer kind of floored me. He said, well, we need to better train our personnel. So I guess the answer to bringing down the cost of nuclear is better training of individuals who operate these reactors. Of course, not to be outdone by that, John Morrow, I mentioned earlier, testified that they are shooting for a levelized cost of electricity from molten salt reactors of 2 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, that would be the lowest price imaginable. And I actually went back and took a look at his sources. His source was primarily from 2020, which was a review of documents that went back as far as 2002. They did include a table in the 2020 report that showed inflation adjusted numbers. And at best, it was about double what he said. But, let's keep in mind that this is all theoretical. This is all just projections. And, know that there had never been a reactor in the US that was built on time and on budget. Take, for instance, the most recent reactor that's being completed in Georgia, Vogtle. That reactor is going to end up costing twice as much and be years beyond when they said that they would bring it online. So you have to take whatever they say with more than just a grain of salt. But back to your question, I'm sorry, Pat, back to your question as to the possibility of it passing. I think there's a very good possibility. I mentioned earlier that this is the third iteration of this particular bill. The first one, and all three were introduced originally in the House by the same legislator, Representative Stein. And the first bill never made it out of committee. The second bill not only made it out of committee, but it was passed by the House and went to the Senate and did not come out of the committee in the Senate. It appears that they probably did not have enough votes on the Senate floor to pass it on the floor. This one very quickly made it through the House and has gone over to the Senate. They held a sponsor testimony. When was that, Pat? May?
Spring sometime.
Yeah, sometime around there. And then they adjourned, and this is the second hearing on it. This was proponent testimony. They'll probably have opponent testimony, which will give Pat and I a chance to testify against it next week. But several members of the committee came right out and praised at least one of the presenters today, which indicates to me that they have no problem with the bill and they are likely to vote for it. So now the issue is really whether or not they'll have enough votes on the Senate floor. And we need to do everything within our means to keep it from happening. Pat, now I'll defer to you.
So, yeah, well, I was just going to say that, that there's a difference between the cost of operating reactors and the cost of new nuclear reactors. And so the Lazard, which is an investment bank, just put out their 2021 report. And that said that the cost of new nuclear is somewhere between 4 and 5 times more expensive for ratepayers than wind or solar, somewhere in between there. And we don't want to be subsidizing, our taxpayers subsidizing something. I don't want to pay 4 to 5 times more for my electricity. And that gets to what listeners to this program might be able to do.
Yes, what can concerned citizens do today? Today is let's see, November 29, and they had the proponent testimony today, and they're probably going to have it next, the opponent testimony next Tuesday, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we have a couple minutes. Tell us what you need from concerned citizens.
So they can go to our website, which is, you can do a search for Ohio Nuclear Free Network, or you can go to onfn.blogspot.com, and there are instructions about how people can contact their senators, which is really the most important thing. You can contact your own senators, and there are email addresses to also contact all the senators. So people could just write one letter and send it by email to those particular senators. And folks can find their senators by using their address on the legislature's website, and all that is on the Ohio Nuclear Free Network website. And then it's really important also if people can write testimony, and they can use the same letter and submit it probably next weekend as official testimony. That will go into the record. That letter will go online, and that would be very important if folks could do that.
All right.
And, be aware that submitting testimony is different than actually going down to the State House and presenting testimony. You can submit a letter saying that you object to it and have it entered into the record without having to go down and testify.
Correct. And there's a wonderful resource on Facebook. It's How Things Work at the Ohio State House that folks can go to get more information if they want to learn about this bill, if they want to write a testimony and how to do it, where to submit it. So it's called How Things Work at the Ohio State House. And the administrator is Rachel Coyle, and she's very, very helpful and knowledgeable. So, my friends, on a scale of 0 to 10, how radioactive is this bill? Lee?
Oh, about 11.
Okay, thank you. How about you, Pat?
Well, I'll agree to that. And I wanted to add that we have 28 very concise talking points about this bill. People can learn more and use those if they write and if they phone. So
they'll go to your Blogspot, which is the Ohio Nuclear Free Network on Blogspot, and they can get those 28 talking points. So when they do write this and testify, they have that good information. Correct?
Yes.
The fact that this bill is so small has allowed us to come up with lots of problems with it. There's lots of things that should be in the bill that just aren't there.
Okay.
And one of the biggest things is cost.
Cost and accountability as well. I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about that separate agency that the industry wants to take away oversight. Well, it's our time right now. Thank you so much today for joining us. We'll look for your testimony next week. It is the Ohio Senate Energy and Public Utilities Committee. And folks, if you're interested, you can show up and just be there for support as well. All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much, Pat and Lee, with the Ohio Nuclear Free Network.
Thank you, Carolyn, and everything you do on your wonderful show.
Thank
We
you.
certainly appreciate being invited.
All right. In addition to our Friday 5 p.m. broadcast on WGRN.org, GrassRoot Ohio now airs on Sundays at 2 p.m. on WCRSFM.org, 92.7, 98.3 in Columbus, and at 4 p.m. on WEJP LP, Wheeling, Moundsville, West Virginia. You can also find us on SoundCloud, Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Thanks for joining us.